Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you guys are here. This is going to be a little different this time. We're going to conduct the meeting in a different fashion. This is a little treat for you guys, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. I'm quite sure that it will be phenomenal and be amazing, the information that you guys are about to receive. So with that being said, I want to welcome all you guys to our June 2021 meeting. Our New York Metro chapter is happy to be here alongside the Claude B. Govan chapter, Tuskegee Airmen. So we will be conducting a presentation for you guys. Actually, they will be conducting a presentation for you guys, and hopefully you will all enjoy it. One thing I would like to say, I definitely have to give credit to when credit is due. Have to big up my man Mike. He's sitting right next to me. Have to big him up. Thank you, Mike, for doing all that you did to kind of put this thing together. Without you being here to put all of this together and the hard work that you did, whatever you put into it, I really appreciate it, and thank you. And I'm quite sure the rest of the members appreciate it as well.
Thank you.
This is going to go a long way. For everybody that donated, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Good looking on stepping up to the plate when we need the help, and you guys are always there to help. So thank you so much for shooting out that helping hand. All right. So again, I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting. We are live here at Viper Studios in sunny New York. So I know you guys might want to be on the beach right now, but thank you for joining us and taking this hour or so out of your beautiful Sunday to be here with us, and hopefully we'll make it worth their while. All right. So there's just a few things that I want to get out before we actually start the presentation. Just some formalities that we have to throw out there. As you all know, we are the Black Pilots of America, New York Metro chapter, and there's just a few things that we have to get out there. Right now, I got a lot of papers here you might see, but there's nothing on them. It's all blank. So it's all blank. So excuse me if I speak out of tune, right, or out of tone. But as I would continue today, we're not going to do all the formality stuff that we normally do, right? Going over the dues and the membership and stuff like that. We're going to skip all of that, and we're going to move right into the presentation. But there are a few announcements that I would like to make. We are really trying to get our meetings or conduct our meetings in person again. I know it's been a long road with COVID, and thank you all for sticking it out with us. And I know these Zoom meetings are a little difficult, but we definitely want to start getting back in person, having our in-person meetings again. We were going to do it this month, but we decided to have this presentation instead. And I think that was a good substitute to an in-person meeting. So next month, we're going to try to have our meetings in person, and most likely we'll be conducting those meetings outside at the airport. Once I get word from the airport letting us know that the COVID restrictions are lifted, then we will probably go back into the main terminal and have our meetings there. All right. So I just want to ramble off a few names, right? And at the end, I will say a little speech, but I would like to ramble off a few names, all right? These names are extremely important to me. It's extremely important to our organization, and everybody that I name, thank you so much. Thank you. I can't thank you enough, all right? Now, the reason why these names are so important, extremely important, especially because what we're going to present to you today is, despite all of the ups and downs, despite all of the negativity and all of the things that us as African American aviators had to endure throughout time, throughout history, right? Tuskegee Airmen, other black aviators, we stand on their shoulders, right? We're the ones that stand on their shoulders. We're the ones that are now responsible for continuing their legacy, and it's our duty to make sure that we do that to our utmost, to the highest standard, right? We have to continue that legacy. We can't let those things die, right? So with that being said, there's some names I'm going to name off. First name is Gordon Allen. Now all you guys know Gordon Allen. Gordon Allen was a member of our chapter. Unfortunately, he had passed on due to a tragic aircraft accident. It's, every time I talk about it, I kind of start to tear up, because Gordon, he's a cool guy, and he definitely did a lot for the organization. He wasn't around visibly as much, but he was definitely there for the organization, and he loved to fly. So Gordon Allen, he was a private pilot, an instrument-rated pilot, and also an airplane owner, right? An airplane owner. Another name I wanted to throw off is Joe Place. Mr. Joe Place, he is always there for the organization. Mr. Joe Place is a longtime member of Black Aviation. He was a part of Negro Airmen International, and then he became a part of Black Pilots of America. Mr. Joe Place started flying a long time ago, not able to continue, but he still loves aviation, and he still supports the organization as much as he possibly can. Now, the names I'm going to name off are some of the guys and girls that became a part of the organization and went on to move to bigger and better things, in a sense, meaning as far as training. Keymoy Allen. Keymoy Allen, he was our chief pilot. He started off as a CFI. BPA gave him that edge, that spark, and now he's an airline pilot. So please, 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 everybody, every name that I give off, a round of applause for each and every one of these individuals on this list. So this is a big accomplishment. Just starting the organization in 2014 and now realizing that we actually have airline pilots that came through our organization is tremendous, right? So Keymoy Allen. Kelvin King, another airline pilot. Kelvin King also has a flight school that he's running now in Philly. Right? He's running that flight school down in Philly. He's running a drone program down in Philly. Kelvin King doing a tremendous job helping the youth and keeping his legacy alive. Michael Evans. Michael Evans, another young man, phenomenal individual. This guy came to the organization when he was, 14, 15 years old, something like that. And now he's an airline pilot. Came in, took him up on a few flights, introduced him to aviation. His family was really engaged in all that he was doing in aviation, his love for aviation. And now he went off and he's flying in the airlines now, or for the airlines. So congratulations to Michael Evans. Jamie Douglas. Jamie Douglas, another phenomenal individual. He is a flight instructor. He helps most of these people in the organization fly now or learn how to fly now. He's also an airline pilot. Jamie Douglas, if anybody out there that want to fly flying, hit me up, hit Mike up, and we're going to get in contact with Jamie, and he's going to square you away. All right? So Jamie Douglas, he is still around, and he's actively teaching, but he also flies for the airlines. Now, this next name, I'm probably going to get your last name wrong, so please don't beat me up when you see me. But Ayo Olympikian, or Olympikian. Sorry if I'm messing up your last name. But Ayo, he is a tremendous, tremendous help to the organization. Ayo is a go-to guy. He's actually our current chief pilot right now. And Ayo, if I sit here and tell you guys how many qualifications that Ayo have, we'd be here for about 4 days because he has almost everything. But just to name a few, Ayo is a commercial rated pilot. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he has his ATP. Ayo is also a mechanic. Ayo is also a helicopter pilot. Ayo is a ground instructor, a flight instructor, and I'm going to stop there because, like I said, we'd be here for days to continue his list of experiences, right? But Ayo, he's, like I said, a go-to guy, and he is our current chief pilot. And with that, partial list that I read off, now you understand why he's our chief pilot, all right? Donald Wingate. Donna Wingate is a retired law enforcement officer who flew for a local law enforcement agency. He is a helicopter pilot, also an airplane pilot. Catherine. Words can't really explain how proud I am of Kathy. She is a tremendous individual. She is our newest CFI. So Kathy is our first female pilot CFI. She's doing a lot of things in aviation. She's a part of a lot of aviation organizations. And again, Kathy's a tremendous person. And that's another young lady that if you're looking to fly, you're looking to learn how to fly, hit us up and we'll get you set up with Kathy as well. Tanya Austin, another phenomenal individual. Tanya, she now is a pilot. She's working on her instrument rating, and she's also airplane owner, right? So tremendous individual. Tanya is doing big things, and continue to do what you do. Tanya actually inspires a lot of individuals. There's a lot of people in this organization right now that was inspired by the things that Tanya has done, and the way she passed on the information and her drive in trying to succeed in her own things. So congratulations to Tanya. Jelani Brooks. Jelani Brooks came to the organization with nothing and left as a commercial rated pilot. Well, he went and got his private pilot certificate, went off and got his commercial pilot certificate, his instrument rating. I believe he might even have his multi-engine rating as well right now, and he's looking to go off to the airline, so he will soon be an airline pilot. Eric Anderson. Me and Eric actually flew together at the same school, or trained together at the same school back in Farmingdale. And Eric, he is a private pilot, and I believe he is working on this instrument as well. Epi Santiago, very special individual. People don't really look at drone operators as pilots for whatever reason, but Epi is an actual commercial drone operator. And he doesn't only have his drone operating certificate, he's actually working for a living in the construction field flying these drones. So Epi, kudos to you as well. The next few names I'm going to name off are special. Everybody's special, but these few individuals that I'm going to name right now even set the bar a little higher. All right? First name, Donnell Davis. Donnell Davis came to the organization, saw the airplanes, saw a lot of African American people in the same room, and everybody was cool with each other, right? Got in the plane, flew, and said, oh no, I got to do this forever now. He became a pilot. Not only has he became a pilot, he went and bought his own airplane. Donnell went and bought his own airplane, and the reason why I put Donnell's name at the top of this particular section right here is because Donnell is the first one out of all of us to make that long, real cross country. We call flights cross country over 50 nautical miles away. He made a real cross country all the way across the other side of the United States. He flew from New York down to Florida, from Florida over to Texas, Texas over to California, California back to New York. That is a true cross country. Donnell, you are doing tremendous things. Keep up the good work, and keep on setting that bar high. And I'm coming for you, because now I'm going to go all the way to California too. And then I'm probably going to go to California and then try to make it to Hawaii or something and come back just to have a one-up on you. But you're doing good things, brother, so continue. Next, my man next to me, Mike. Mike, again, I know Mike for a long time. I was trying to get him into aviation for a while. He kept on ducking me, so I had to keep on chasing him. But finally, he came around. Mike ended up coming into the organization. He proved to be all in. He does whatever he can do to help. He, takes the extra. He goes the extra mile. Mike went and got his private pilot certificate. He's working on his instrument rating right now. He actually took and passed his instrument ground instructor certificate. Well, he doesn't have the certificate yet, but he went and took the test and passed that, so he'll soon be a ground instructor for instruments. He is an airplane owner multiple times, so he owns multiple airplanes now. And he is a part owner of a flight school, a local flight school here at Farmingdale Airport. So, Mike, congratulations to all the things that you do, and continue doing what you do.
Thank you, brother.
Sydney Irish. He is our vice president of the organization. Sydney is the go-to guy. Matter of fact, I'm going to let you talk about Sid real quick. I know you want to say a few words about Sid, so go ahead, Mike. You can get...
All right. So what happened is I missed an opportunity last presentation because Sydney Irish was there along with Joe Place and Mr. Price. The area was small, so I didn't want to squeeze everybody in a little area. However, again, Sid is our go-to guy when it comes to aviation. Anything aviation, you call Sid. We call him the professor. Sorry. So he, you need advice taking a test, you call the professor. You need advice trying to fix something on your plane, you call the professor. You are proficient in flying, might be, a pilot already, and are looking to get other skills or other ratings, you call the professor. He'll fly with you, sharpen up your skills, get you on track, good to go. He's been flying for 30 plus years.
He's my mentor. Like I said, he's our go-to guy. I could talk on forever talking about the professor, but he's definitely someone that is a stone, a rock in our organization. I'll leave it there, but he wears so many hats, I could go on forever. Thank you, Sid. I appreciate you.
Sid, again, I'm not even going to continue with that one because I can talk all day, and you know what I mean by that. I call this guy probably every day, maybe 20 times a day, and always got him on the phone, and we going over a few things and, talking about aviation and so forth and so on. So thank you for all you do, Sid. I'm going to skip myself. I'm going to save myself for last, but Winston Faison, another really good guy. He's doing a lot of good things right now. Faison actually became a pilot. He had got his private pilot certificate. That wasn't good enough for him. So he went on and got his instrument rating. From his instrument rating, he went and got his ground instructor certificate. From his ground instructor certificate, he went and got his instrument ground instructor certificate. He said, nah, that's not good enough. So he went and got a drone certificate. That wasn't good enough, so he went and got a CFI. Now he's working on a CFII, and he started a program called Aviation for Us, which BPA provides the flights for Aviation for Us. So we work closely together. Aviation for Us, I can't even count the amount of kids that went through that program, but I'm quite sure it's over 100 young aviators that's been through that program, which we all provide ground training and flight training for the inner city youth. So you're doing tremendous things, and keep up the good work. And also, he's an airplane owner. And going back to that cross country, I was close to you, Donnell. We flew down to Texas to go and pick up his plane, so I'm getting there. All right. Mr. Floyd. Floyd is another pilot in the organization. I know these are a lot of names, but these are the accomplishments that BPA had since 2014. So I think it's worthy to talk about. All right. So moving down that list, Floyd, also really good guy. He's a private pilot. I believe he's working on his instrument rating as well. So Floyd, keep up the good work and continue doing what you're doing. Clyde Vanell. Now, this is another guy I can talk about for, 10 days, right? Clyde Vanell, if it wasn't for Clyde, this organization wouldn't be an organization right now. Clyde put the seed, he planted the seed, he shot me that seed, and that seed never left me. So Clyde, thank you so much for all you did for the organization. Thank you so much for what you continue to do for the organization. And thank you for being the one that planted that seed and kind of got the ball rolling for us to continue doing what we're doing in the organization. And by the way, Clyde is also an airplane owner. Michael Machat, he is also an airplane owner. Daniel Reefer, airplane owner, Daniel, I can talk about him for a long time too. Daniel's another one that's doing a lot of good things for the organization. He's doing a lot of good things for himself. Daniel went off and bought an airplane before he was a pilot. All right, bought an airplane, said, you know what, I'm gonna go and buy an airplane now, learning my own airplane how to fly. So Daniel started flying, got his private pilot certificate, went on and got his instrument rating, got his commercial certificate, went and got his multi-engine rating. I believe he's working on something else right now. And like I said, he's an airplane owner and he flies almost every single day. So if you want to get in the air, if you want to travel long distance, Daniel's the man. Daniel is our first, actually he's the second, but he's our first pilot to do it multiple times. Daniel flew outside of the country. So Daniel flew from New York to Florida. He said he didn't like the way the beach smelled in Florida, so he decided he was going to go to the Bahamas. Went out to the Bahamas. The water was too cold in the Bahamas, so he wanted to go further south, and he ended up in DR. So he flew that flight all the way to DR and then flew back. So if you want to go outside of the country, Daniel's the guy to talk to. All right, Daniel, continue doing your thing. You're doing tremendous things, and keep it up. The last few names I'm going to name here are some of the student pilots. And yes, we do have some female student pilots, thanks to Kathy and thanks to Tanya for kind of paving that way for them. We have Naomi Littles. We have Tanisha Solomon. We have Mars Acosta. We have Mkaya Brown. And we have Adrian Hawthorne. We have Joy Acosta. We have Alexander Powell, which, by the way, is going to be our next airline pilot. And he's, what, 16 years old? Yep. 15, 16 years old? I can guarantee you, I bet you $1 million if I had it, that he's going to be our next airline pilot. Marvin Ennis, Stanley Van Omeren, Matt Van Omeren, Israel Price, and Willett Price. And last but not least, I'm not going to talk a lot about myself, but myself as well. I'm trying to kind of follow the lead of these guys, right? Believe it or not, the reason why I continue to do what I do is because of all of you. If all of you weren't there, then I wouldn't be where I'm at now, right? I was just looking at some numbers before I came here, and I'm not sure if these numbers are accurate, but it seemed like it was about a little over 600,000 pilots, certified pilots in the United States. Of that 600,000 pilots in the United States, only about 3.4% are African American. So that's putting you in the 20,000, around the 20,000 range. Out of that, only about 2,000 are law enforcement pilots. From that, only about 2% are African American. So I just became a law enforcement helicopter pilot. I do have an airplane certificate. I just got my instrument rating in a helicopter. I'm working on my captain's or PIC in the helicopter. Also have a check ride coming up in the airplane pretty soon, and I'm continuing to work on ratings. And I'm telling you, believe it or not, the only reason why I'm doing it is because of all of you guys. Y'all keep that spark in me. You keep that fire burning in me, and I continue to do what I do because of you. So thank you so much, because again, if it wasn't for you guys, it wouldn't have worked out for me. All right. So without holding up these guys, I know you guys are ready to put on your presentation. Without further ado, I would like to introduce members of the Claude B. Govan Tuskegee Airmen chapter. They are going to put on a tremendous presentation for us. So guys, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask your questions. Throw them in the chat. We'll read out the questions for you, and your questions will be answered. Like I said, enjoy, and we'll talk about it towards the end.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mike. Again, we really appreciate having the opportunity to speak to you and listening to all the names and the accomplishments of the Black Pilots of America. the Tuskegee Airmen succeeded in paving the way for these opportunities to happen. And it's nice to see that so many have taken advantage of that and pursued a life in aviation. The Tuskegee Airmen, most of you already know probably, and they were the trailblazers to get blacks in the air because they were really interested. They wanted to fight for our country. They wanted to fight World War II. And prior to World War II, there were no blacks in United States military aviators. We have two aviators from World War I. One was known as the Black Swallow of Death. He flew for France. He tried to, when America entered the war in World War I, he tried to sign up for the American Air Force, and he was denied because of his color. Bessie Coleman, another female aviator, had to go to France to pursue her dream of becoming a pilot, and eventually came back and flew here. One of the big challenges for the Tuskegee Airmen was the 1925 War College statement that said blacks could not fly a plane. They did not possess the mentality, the strength, the determination, the physical coordination to operate or repair an aircraft. And this permeated all the way through until World War II. In 1938, the door began to open with a civilian pilot training program. This program was intended to start to train pilots across the country in case the United States had to enter World War II. 6 black colleges were included in this training program, Tuskegee being one of those programs, locations. And it turned out that that became the location for the training of the Tuskegee Airmen, hence the name Tuskegee Airmen. In 1940, President Roosevelt started the draft, a draft program that was the first peacetime draft, and one of the statements in that draft program was that anyone, regardless of color, could serve in the U.S. military. There were no restrictions. It did not say that they would be integrated. So there were units in the United States Armed Forces, but they were segregated units. In 1941, Tuskegee, Alabama, and the Tuskegee Institute was selected to be the location for training the black pilots. Thanks to the NAACP, media, and other proponents and supporters of black aviation, the Tuskegee Airmen, it was originally called the Tuskegee Experiment, because at that time it was an experiment. It started in 1941 in Tuskegee, as we just said, and Eleanor Roosevelt went to Tuskegee to get support and brought fundraisers to get the completion of Moton Field and the Army Airfield, because it was incomplete. They were flying out of one, it was a Kennedy Airfield, and the other two had not been finished. She did something that got everything jumped off the ground, and that she had Chief Anderson, who was a flight instructor at Tuskegee, give her a ride in the aircraft, in spite of her security guards telling her no, not to do it. She not only took a flight around the airfield, but she wanted a longer flight and wanted to make sure that his picture and her picture were taken together when that plane landed, so she could take it back to Washington and say, these men can fly an aircraft. She was a big proponent of blacks in the military and equal justice for all of our citizens. 1942, the first of the graduating class, there were 13 in that first class, and they were all college graduates, college students. 13 went into the program for Tuskegee. 5 of them in 1942 came out and earned their pilot's wings. That made them officers in the U.S. military. As time went on, they were supported, not supported, but it was proven that white officers, not white military enlisted men, did not have to salute black officers. So that was an inequality right there. Of those first 5 who earned their wings was Benjamin O. Davis, who later became the commander and in-chief of the Tuskegee Airmen. Benjamin O. Davis was an unusual man. He went to West Point. During his time at West Point, he was not spoken to. He did not interact with his other cadets. He was shunned, except in times that was that had to do with class time, instruction. But during that whole time, and he was at West Point, he was not spoken to. As a result of that, once he left, he never returned And this is something that was revealed to me by his nephew and his great-nephew, that he never returned to West Point, but he went on to become the leader of the Tuskegee Airmen. In 1943, the Tuskegee Airmen went into battle for the first time, going to Tunisia to give support for ground troops and bombing and strafing such things as railroad cars and ships. In 1943 also, they joined the coverage and support of the troops in Anzio. They were flying at that time P-40 aircraft, which were not the best of aircraft, but they proved to be excellent pilots, and their record flying those planes during that particular exchange in Anzio was better than any of the squadrons that were flying support with them. Eventually they they went to Ramitelli in Italy, and in Ramitelli they started to support the 15th Air Force. At this time they were flying P-51s. The P-51 was a much faster aircraft. It was basically the Cadillac of fighter aircraft for the United States at that time. They had a speed of 400, although they could fly up to a speed of 550 miles an hour if they were flying pretty much straight down. The only problem we found this out from a pilot that spoke with us who actually flies those P-51s, he owns one, from the American Air Power Museum. Once it got to 500 miles an hour, the controls had a tendency to lock, and they may not be able to pull out of a dive in that situation. But these Tuskegee pilots flew those aircraft at well over 400 miles an hour as they supported the B-17 bombers. These bombers carried a crew of 10. The crew of the B-17 bombers were all white. The exchange between the B-17s and once the P-40s began to escort them became a bond that started something in the military well before the desegregation of the military. Once the B-17s were joined by the P-51s flown by the Tuskegee Airmen, their mortality rate went way down. If you think of 10 members of these B-17s, and there was a high mortality rate prior to the Tuskegee Airmen, where they would lose, of 100 planes, for instance, they would lose as many as half or 60% of those planes. So you could look at roughly 600 members of the military being shot down. When the Tuskegee Airmen joined and began to protect those bombers, their orders were, you do not leave the bombers. You are here to protect them. You don't go flying off to pursue German fighters so that you can become an ace. Your job is to protect the bombers no matter what. They did this with astounding accuracy. They did it with determination. And despite many different things that were going against them, they had a trip to a bombing run to Berlin on one particular occasion that they were basically denied by the American military to have enough fuel to go on that flight. They had smaller wing tanks that would not allow them to escort the bombers all the way to Berlin. There is a story about a great train apprehension or acquisition of the size tanks they needed to fly. The pilots who flew these had a great support crew, grounds crew, which they could not have done anything without. This ground crew and some of the pilots decided to acquire the necessary tanks to make their plane, be able to fly and make that whole distance into Berlin. There's a picture over here, depicts the P-51s escorting those B-17s on that particular bombing run. One of the pilots, and this is his plane, is Roscoe Brown. He is, during this particular bombing run, not only did they exceed where they were supposed to go beyond their location where they were supposed to be relieved, which they weren't, but with the tanks, they encountered German jets for the first time in World War II. Roscoe Brown was one of the pilots for Tuskegee that shot down one of the German jets. This is something that had not been done before. The German jets flew roughly 150 miles an hour faster than the P-51s. The P-51 was an extremely maneuverable plane. Because of the pilots flying them, they were able to do things that maybe others would not be able to do because they were such great pilots and understood how to make that plane maneuver as well as they did. But kudos to Dr. Roscoe Brown, who did many things during the war and after the war. I'm trying to give you an overview of what they accomplished, but there's something that I think you need to know is that with all the glory and everything else that went along with it and shows what great things they did, they had to sacrifice an awful lot. In speaking with some of the airmen, and I was very lucky to speak to some of these airmen before they passed away, Roscoe Brown being one, William Johnson, another one who was a resident of Glen Cove, who passed away in January, and coincidentally, he arrived at Tuskegee Army Airfield on D-Day, 1944. So he started his pilot training at Tuskegee Army Airfield on D-Day in 1944. One of his big comments was that when he was in high school in Glen Cove, he used to see the planes fly over from Mitchell Field, fly over his house and fly over his school. Knowing that there were no black pilots in those planes, he decided then, when he was in high school, that he wanted to be in the air as a pilot. He pursued that dream and did what he could do to become a Tuskegee Airman. All of these airmen, when they left the North, and quite a few grew up and resided in the North and traveled south, they were exposed to very uncomfortable, to put it mildly, discriminatory practices. Mr. Johnson, unfortunately, did not have the opportunity to fly into battle and graduate. The war ended before he could finish. He was the second to last graduating class. In a conversation with him, when he talked about his first day at Tuskegee Army Airfield, he had such a great smile on his face. He was so proud of what he had accomplished and where he was going to be. When it came time the war had ended, and the officers spoke to them, their graduating class, and said, "You are able to continue and finish graduating." He, among many of the members of his graduating class, decided the war was over, and what they wanted to do was become a part of the action to put their selves on the line and fight for a country that discriminated against them. But he decided the discrimination he faced in training, not at Army Airfield, but off the base and other locations, was not worth the effort at that point, because he had missed the opportunity to actually get into action. There were roughly 990 pilots trained at Tuskegee Army Airfield. Of those, 420 were twin-engine pilots, and they would become the pilots and crew members of the B-25, and they were members of the 477th Bombardment Group. The 477th Bombardment Group did not have the opportunity to join the war. They trained over and over again, and in speaking to some of those members of the 477th, they knew that they were being trained even though they knew what they were doing and should have completed the program. But because of certain segregationist practices, they were not going to be allowed to fly in Europe. And in speaking with some of them, their opinion, and I respect their opinion very highly, they knew that they would not be allowed to go and bomb white civilians, white military in large numbers in Europe. So they were being held until the war in Europe was over, and then they were going to be shipped out to Japan. It was okay to go to Japan and bomb, but not to Europe. The war ended before they were able to complete that mission with the development and dropping of the atomic bomb. However, the 477th made an impact on integrating and desegregating the military when it came to the Freeman Field Mutiny, as it's called. And the quick background on that is there was a segregationist and a very, for lack of a better word, at the present time, racist commander of this Army airfield. And he developed so that the black officers and the white officers would not share the same officers club. He came up with two separate officers clubs. The black officers said, no, we're not going to go for that, and we want to be in the same officers club with everyone else. We are officers, as our wings and our standing as pilots designates. So they developed a program of going in, a pattern of going in and having a few try to get in, they were turned away. The next day they would try again, a few more to get in, and they were turned away. On one particular instance, 3 of the black officers went and made an attempt. As they were trying to get by, one accidentally nudged an officer, a white officer who was standing in front of them, obstructing their entrance. They were immediately arrested and put in, not in prison, but incarcerated. They were brought up on charges. The commander of that base decided that he was going to have everyone sign, in particular the black officers, that they understood and they were basically going along with 2 separate officers' clubs. The 101 officers said, I am not signing that. And at that time, that was considered treason. They disobeyed an order to sign, punishable at that time by death. They were arrested, and thanks to the efforts, it leaked to the news, it leaked to the NAACP, and a note was sent to the upper echelon of the military, and it violated what the upper echelon of the military was proposing and designated it should not happen. That commander was relieved. They were released, except for one who was charged with disobeying an order. And instead of being put to death as the prosecution wanted, he was fined $150 and lost his standing. He was dishonorably discharged. So the 477th, even though they did not make it into battle, made a giant leap in the statement by banding together and not signing this statement that they agreed with 2 officers' clubs. And you can say in 1945 that this happened, and it was the first of a sit-in by blacks, and it was in the military. So the civil rights era started way before the 60s with the Tuskegee Airmen and with their P-51 pilots, with the 477th bomber unit as well. I had a rare opportunity to meet a lead bombardier for B-17, the 15th Air Force, when I was on a flight to Washington. When he spoke to me, he said he would look out of the window and he would see the red tails outside. And he was extremely happy to see that, and he knew that he was in good hands at that time. A lead bombardier is the one who says, okay, it's time to drop your bombs. He's the one that decides all for everyone else to go. Everyone else just kind of goes along with him because they must follow. So the lead bombardier is the one who decides when and where the bombs will be dropped. So once he made it to that position, he still was very happy to see the red tails outside. They could see each other. The pilots of the B-17s and the crew members of the B-17s could see who was escorting them. And they were very happy. They all requested the red tails. One of the planes, and I believe it was Roscoe's plane, that he had his wife initially, and then he changed the name of it to by request.
It was originally Kitten, yes.
Yes. His P-51 was originally Kitten, and he changed it, the name of that plane, to by request, because they were requested by B-17 pilots as they were beginning their bombing runs. There are quite a few characteristics about these planes and what the pilots had to go through and the P-51 pilots had to do. And I'm going to turn this over to my good friend, Paul Berger, who's going to talk to you about what it was like to fly these planes, what it was like to try and survive in these planes. Paul.
Well, thank you so much, Ray. And I want to thank the fellows on the podium here. I want to thank Tim, who is the president of the Claude B. Govan chapter, for helping to put all this together. And I want to thank the Mr. Viper Studios back here, because without him, none of this would have happened. I have to believe that as you're looking at me, you got to wonder a couple things. Number one, what's a white dude doing talking to a group of black pilots about black airmen. Well, let me give you another one. Not only am I a white dude, but I'm a white Jewish dude. Now, this was my opening statement when I brought the movie Red Tails to Harlem and the very, very first opening. And you can imagine that the crowd, after seeing me standing next to a black Tuskegee Airman, was really upset. Like, what's this guy doing stealing this fella's thunder? So I let them know that it was a white Jewish dude who in 1939 helped to begin the NAACP. So I said, folks, I guess you'll let me stay. And yes, they did. I am a torchbearer. That's my title. Ray is the producer director of this particular program, and we thank Ray profusely. He is also the public relations officer. I am a torchbearer for the Claude B. Govan group. And what does that mean? It means that it's my job to keep the legacy alive. They've got their jobs, I've got my job, and we are joined incredibly. Even though our skin color may be different, we are joined. So I'm going to take you back in time, folks, and I thank all of you for letting us into your living rooms, dens, etc. I'm going to take you back in time to first 1944, June 6, 77 years ago today. The Allied forces were invading Europe. The Atlantic Wall that Hitler had worked so very hard to put together, and he felt was impenetrable. Our boys, and some of them on the ground were black folks, were trying to breach it. We're going to come back to that in just a little bit, but I need to tell you, I need to back up the clock, the hands of time, even more so, to let you know what it was like in the United States when war was declared. The United States was not ready for war. Our boys in the armed forces on the ground, white and black, were training with broomsticks. There were simply not enough rifles to go around. We didn't have enough tanks. We didn't have enough ships. And of course, no one expected the massacre at Pearl Harbor to take place. Roosevelt kind of knew that we would be pulled into the war in Europe sooner or later, but no one expected us to be surprised by the Japanese. More than 300 frontline aircraft were destroyed at Pearl Harbor, along with many capital ships. So the United States was pretty much alone. England was already being bombarded from the air. Fortunately, Roosevelt, in his planning, had turned England into a giant runway and an aircraft carrier for the B-17 heavy bomber. The Joint Chiefs of Staff knew that they could not defeat Germany with armed land forces, tanks, men, and aircraft were almost non-existent except the B-17. They've put all their chips in that particular aircraft. They felt the only way to destroy Nazi Germany was to bring the war to their centers of production. And with the enormous armament that the B-17s utilized, she bristled, as you can see, with 50 caliber machine guns in almost every plane. And you folks who fly commercially and fly for enjoyment know that you put enough machine guns around an aircraft, you're going to bring something down, even if the gunners are lousy. The B-17s were designed to fly in box formations. They were called kill zones. It's almost like a fly getting caught with 15 fly swatters around and can't survive. But they missed something. The Germans were developing frontline aircraft since 1935. They had a chance to test these aircraft during the Spanish Civil War and their Blitzkrieg offensive in Europe before we got involved. They had a superior aircraft in the ME-109. We had a P-40 that originally saw action, and you'll note that the markings on it are for nationalist China, saw action in 1937 with the famed, anybody who Flying Tigers, except that the P-40 could not assume long-range combat efficiency. It only had a range of 300 miles. She was equipped with 50 caliber machine guns, but the Joint Chiefs said, oh, that's okay. Okay, we don't care. We're going to put these things out there, the B-17s out there, in such enormous formations and with such great numbers that nothing but nothing could withstand them. Well, the Joint Chiefs were wrong. And what I want to talk about a little bit is what went on the inside of these B-17s in a combat mission. Now, this is different than anything else I've ever done as I represented the airmen. But you folks are flyers. The aircraft skin on your aircraft is just about the same thickness as it was on a B-17. So close your eyes with me and let me carry you on a combat mission with a B-17. And as I finish my presentation with regard to what went on, I'm going to read a chapter paragraph to you. This is something else I have never done before. Why am I doing it? Because it's a real chapter as seen through the eyes of aircraft personnel as these B-17s came back from a combat mission. And to the faint of heart, let me tell you that this will give you nightmares. Now you say to me, well, Paul, I get it. I know what you're going to talk to me about, the horrors and so on, but why is this so important? Why is this so important in this context? It's so important, and Ray touched on it very, very quietly, but that's the way he does things. But he got his point across. That had close air support not been achieved, and I'm talking about the white flyers who flew much higher. They called it in those days CAP, Combat Air Patrol. But with the Tuskegee Airmen who flew basically wing to wing with the bombers, I will tell you that none of us, black, Jew, black, white man, would be here today. We now know that Hitler was this close to developing the atom bomb. He already had a delivery system in the V-2 rocket that was pulverizing London. And all Hitler was concerned about was wiping out populations. That's probably one of the few things that kept the German jet fighter, the Me-262, from being built in great numbers. Hitler wanted bombers, so he insisted to his designers, I want this thing to carry loads. I want this thing to carry bombs. And I will settle for nothing else. Well, all they could come up with at that time were engines capable of supporting a fighter aircraft, not supporting a bomber aircraft. So while these were produced and produced in significant numbers, they didn't make their appearance till close to the end of the war. And as you heard from Ray, our people showed the rest of the world. And let me just say, you're probably saying, how could he say our people? Come on, look at the color of his skin. Well, the great Bill Wheeler, And he was called Wild Bill, who designed this particular jacket. And I get a little broken up on this. I'll be the first one to say it. He's the guy who brought me into the organization. There were 2 recreations of the gold medal that he received from then President Bush. His son has one, and I have the other. I didn't steal it. Bill said, "You're one of us now, Paul." I said, "How can that be?" He said, "You're one of us now." And that's all that counts. So I feel very honored to carry his words to you. And thanks to Bill and all the guys that came before us, I hope I'm doing the right thing for you. So, where am I going with this? I kind of got sidetracked. Ray touched on it. I'm going to continue it. There became a brotherhood in arms. Now, I know some of you folks, I understand from our gentleman here, some of you folks are law enforcement. Some of you folks are ex-military. I'm a soldier myself, Vietnam soldier. Never fired a shot. But what I'm about to tell you, I'm sure you'll understand. You weren't out there, or I wasn't out there fighting for God. I wasn't out there fighting for country. I wasn't out there fighting for the flag. I was fighting for my buddy. It was my job to keep him alive. And when we got our orders for Vietnam, Nixon pulled the plug. But that would have been my job. When the Tuskegee Airmen were finally allowed to fly close air support, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. As Ray told you, they were close enough to these aircraft. This was the formation scenario. They were close enough to these aircraft, to see the white counterparts. And there became, in my opinion, a brotherhood, the very, very first brotherhood between black folks and white folks. And Roscoe, when I first met him, I said, "Roscoe, how did you bring down those jets?" Oh, he said, "It was pretty simple. I looked up and I went, ba, 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 ba." Oh, come on, Roscoe, because I thought he was really like a pompous guy. Well, he wasn't. Roscoe's position was, it took 14 guys on the ground to keep me in the air. Team effort, working together. So, looks like I lost the wheel here, but that's okay. So, let me run that scenario by you again. The guys got up, white guys got up. Remember, this is early 1942. Got up, went to an 8 o'clock briefing, started their engines, and were off. They left the clear skies of England or Italy, and almost an eighth of a way to their target, the skies suddenly went black. What was it? It wasn't a storm, ladies and gentlemen. It was German fighter aircraft. Now, I was privileged amongst aside from the Tuskegee Airmen, to meet and interview a German Luftwaffe pilot. And he told me, we mastered these B-17s almost from the beginning. We came in wing to wing from a distance. And the B-17s were throwing 50 caliber machine guns at us. But we stayed out of range. Each ME-262, I'm sorry, 262s also, but each ME-109 fired at least 2 20-millimeter cannon rounds. Each gun more than 600 rounds a minute. That's 1,200 rounds a minute, coming from about 300 aircraft. So now you're on the inside of this aircraft, just like you'd be on the inside of your own. A cannon round is completely different than a 50 caliber machine gun round. I don't know what that is. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I've never had this before. I don't know what we've got here. 50, completely different. Sorry. a machine gun bullet will go right on through you. A 50 caliber machine, a 20 millimeter cannon round will explode into hundreds of razor sharp shards that will pierce the skin of the aircraft and rip up human flesh. The United States Army Air Force, and that's what they were called in those days, wasn't the U.S. Air Force at that time. Well, we'll help out, guys. We'll just give you a flak vest made of lead. Those vests weighed about 70 pounds. Try to fight in that when your fingers are so cold that unless you wore your gloves, your fingers would break off. They were fighting at 40 degrees below zero. And you said, well, they had gloves and electric. They didn't always work. Sometimes they leaked and turned to ice. But these fellas had no choice. They had to save their ship. So they fired and fired and fired and fired. And on occasion, they were successful. But as Ray alluded to, the losses were incredible in those early years before close air support. 60 to 80 aircraft a day being lost. Each aircraft carried a crew of 10. 800 men a day being lost. Things got so bad that the Joint Chiefs of Staff were considering stopping daylight bombing completely. And I say to you with all honesty, had they done that, none of us would be here. So they continued on. The guys that made it back had dinner, got patched up, wrote a letter to their wives, their girlfriends, or other, went to sleep, and they were right back in that briefing room again. And close air support did come. First, it came in the form of the Thunderbolt, P-47 Thunderbolt, and again, the Tuskegee Airmen distinguished themselves in North Africa with this outdated aircraft, were finally given the P-47 Thunderbolt, and then finally given the P-51D Mustang. And we're going to run up in just a minute to 1944. But now I'm going to read to you, and this is going to be very difficult for me to do because I've never done it before. But I'm going to read to you a section of a page written by a gentleman on the ground when one of these B-17 flights came in. And then we'll go on to 1944 for just a bit. And we're going on to, after this, we're going to go on to Ploesti, which was the German area of oil production. That's what the 15th Air Force, and Ray spoke to you about it, that's what the 15th Air Force spent most of their time in. And the Tuskegee Airmen provided cover for the 15th Air. So before I read this terribly gruesome thing to you, let me tell you one other positive story. When I was serving at the American Air Power Museum several years ago during Memorial Day, a lady came up to me and she said, look, you're with the Tuskegee Airmen? I said, yes, I work with them. 15th Air Force? Yes. She said, my husband was there. And had it not been for your group, I would be visiting him across the street in the cemetery. And my family would never have been allowed to grow and prosper. Can there be a more wonderful testimonial? I think not. Here we go. Some bombers landed with 200 to 300 holes in them. And crew members in worse shape than their planes. Arms and kneecaps sheared off. Eyes blown out of their sockets. Torsos torn open so widely that the flight surgeon could see the dead man's lungs. Pretty heavy duty. So, let's get to 1944 and Ploesti. The bombers had to come in at almost treetop level. No air defense. They couldn't do anything other than that. Why did they come in so low? Because the German guns were 88, they called them the famed 88. That's the same artillery shell that they had in their Tiger tanks. Their Tiger tanks were the superior tanks. There's nothing in the United States and Britain and France that could stand up to them. So this is a 20 millimeter cannon round. Think about this, a round 4 times the size, being fired with radar control. And the only way to get around that was to come in literally at treetop level. And so these terrible situations that I talked about. But when they came out, and many of them came out, as Ray told you, they were shepherded home by the Tuskegee Airmen. Once again, this brotherhood of the air. So, just a little bit more about 1944 and today. There were 2 beachheads, 2 American beachheads in 1944, Omaha and Utah Beach. I'm sure most of you folks have seen Saving Private Ryan. If you remember those visuals, and the generals that were actually, who survived that area, said that that was the closest thing to the real thing they'd ever seen. And there were some black folks on that beach as well, make no mistake about it. There were black folks in the infantry and armor brigades and so on and so forth at that time. So why am I bringing it up? Well, Utah Beach, which was just down the coast, I was at Normandy, not as a soldier, but as a visitor. I saw those enormous bluffs. And I also saw Utah Beach. Our boys literally walked in at Utah Beach and received a hell of a beating at Omaha. Why? Why? Because the Air Force, Army Air Force, or U.S. Air Force actually at the time, came in with B-26 Marauders. B-26 is almost the same look as that B-25, except it has a single tail. Low level, pulverized the German defenses. Now, Ray talked to you about the 477th Bomb Group. The 477th Bomb Group was trained in low-level bombing. The 477th was also equipped on a special aircraft with a 75 millimeter recoilless rifle in the nose. Had our stupid government allowed the 477th into action, how many white boys could have been saved? They would have gone down to the deck, which is exactly what they were trained to do, released their bombs, and those that had the 75 millimeter would have taken those German concrete pillboxes out. But they didn't. The United States government, as Ray alluded to, said it's okay for a black man to fight a white man one-on-one. But it was not okay for a black man to bomb a white population. Just incredible. It's okay, however, for a black man to bomb a yellow population. And that's why they were released to Japan. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope I haven't missed anything. I hope not. If you have any questions, Ray and I are here for you. I hope the words that I provided, I know they're close to my heart. I hope they're close to your heart. And my job, and I'm going to lose it a little bit again, as long as I have air in my body, is to keep the legacy of the airmen alive. And these gentlemen are living proof of what was accomplished. We even have, and they'll tell you, female black pilots. I flew with one myself. So I thank you for your time. Keep them flying, and if we can have any questions you guys or gals might have, we're here for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. A quick follow-up. The Tuskegee Airmen fought a battle here and overseas. They had 2 wars, they called it the Double V. In speaking with Roscoe Brown when he returned from his overseas engagement, they were on the same ships as white military. The difference is when they arrived back in port, the white military were sent down the gangplank one way, and they had a band and a big hoopla and confetti and everything else. The black military were diverted to the left, and as he put it, we had 2 saxophones to welcome us home. That didn't deter many of the airmen from continuing their lives and make a contribution to themselves, their future families, and the country. Dabney Montgomery, who was at Ramitelli and part of the grounds crew that apprehended or acquired those tanks, went on to become a bodyguard for Martin Luther King on one of the Selma marches. They shared the same godmother. He was a leader. He spoke many times to children, to youth, to adults, to inmates at Rikers Island. Wilfred DeFore, who was also at Ramitelli from 1943 to 1945, was also part of the grounds crew. He was also part of that raid that acquired the tanks. He came back and rose in the U.S. Postal Service. He opened his own real estate business. So they became viable members of the community, their community, and to the country. One of the airmen came back, and the Twin Towers, when they went down, imploded. He was part of the team that developed that imploding process. So just because they were Tuskegee Airmen in World War II, they went on to do great things because they were great men. The Tuskegee Airmen are great men. We talked about pilots being 990 roughly. There were approximately 16,000 in the Tuskegee experience. After 1945, it was changed to the Tuskegee experience so it would not be confused with the Tuskegee experiment, which also went on in Tuskegee and has to do with the U.S. government intentionally infecting blacks with syphilis and not attending to them to see how it would go. So they were in turn, in essence, guinea pigs. So that Tuskegee experiment only lasted until 1945 for the Tuskegee Airmen, that designation. And it became the Tuskegee experience, and it covered everyone from 1941 to 1949, when the Tuskegee Airmen were no longer, and that unit was no longer segregated. We hope we've given you an idea of what they experienced. We can't possibly touch on all the things they had to sacrifice to do this. We can't touch on all the things they had to endure, all the contributions they made. Many of the military during the war made sacrifices. The Tuskegee Airmen made the sacrifice there and here because they were returned home. They were not looked upon as heroes. They were looked upon as the same people they were left when they left. They were discriminated against. They were not supported. They could not get a job flying, even though they could fly. They proved themselves to be able to fly. The mechanics, the grounds crew, they went into the war with the U.S. Army War College saying they lacked the skills and the ability to take care of an aircraft. That was not true. They would literally piece together parts of an aircraft to come out with one that was whole, that was usable. So the credit goes to the men on the ground and the men in the air. The glory ones and those that made the ones who got all the glory shine to those that were still here. If you have any questions about the Tuskegee Airmen and what they accomplished and continue to accomplish, please don't hesitate to let us know, and we will hopefully give you an answer that is suitable to your question. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share a little tiny piece of what the Tuskegee Airmen went through. There is nothing close to what they experienced, to what we talked to you about today. But it's just a little tiny piece of what they had to endure and the fortitude they went through to go against a policy of the U.S. military. Again, because of that Army War College statement. So all of their commanding officers, most of them, believed that they were incapable of doing anything, accomplishing any feats. So it was a struggle right through the end of the war. They were still being fought. They were still up against the U.S. military saying, we need to get them out of here. And they continually fought to keep themselves involved, keep themselves in the air, and to keep their self-respect as viable military, viable pilots, and viable human beings. And their message, even today, to the youth of today, is stand fast, become educated, and not be deterred from your goal. Thank you.
Wow, that was a lot of information, and I really appreciate the time you guys took out to come here today. The knowledge that you withhold inside is tremendous. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You know, words can't really explain the things that we just heard, the lessons that I've learned here from you guys. And I thank you so much for
pleasure.
For allowing us to be a part of the story now and learn more. So thank you.
Keep them flying, buddy.
Absolutely. That's the goal. That's the goal. So our job is to, like I said earlier, is to continue that legacy and keep it going.
Roger
As
that.
you guys tell the story, we go and fly and let people actually see it.
Roger that.
You
Right.
are a part of history yourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So just a few more things I want to throw out there for you guys. There are a few important dates that's coming up for the upcoming event for the Aviation for Us program. We have some flights on the 19th. We have approximately 10 young aviators that's going to come out, and we're going to take them up on the 19th. They are also having their graduation ceremony on the 26th, which is going to be at the Community Center in Brooklyn. July 7th is going to be the next class for Aviation for Us. August 1st and August 8th, we also having a flying event. It's going to be a flying event at Farmingdale Airport. August 14th is going to be another graduation ceremony for Aviation for Us. Another important event that's coming up, June 12th. This is going to be in New Jersey, so it's coming up. Wasn't that next week? June 12th, next week. I sent out the email, so all you guys should have gotten the email. This was sent from Kathy. They call it all female pilots. So all female pilots or all of the inspiring female pilots and us guys should be supporting that, right? We're going to go out to Jersey on June 12th. It's going to be at Old Bridge, at our family out there in Old Bridge, New Jersey, another BPA chapter out there. The event is going to be from 1 to 5. I'll shoot out the information again, and hopefully we can get some people to fly out there and maybe even some people to drive out there to help support that calling for female pilots, students included. They're going to have games, music, planes, and, of course, food. So come out there, enjoy the time out there, and hope to see you all out there. But, again, I can't thank you guys enough.
Okay.
This was really good. Thank you, Mike, for setting it up, for being the bridge between the two organizations. And on behalf of BPA, the New York Metro chapter, and also the national organization, I thank you guys again for coming out. We appreciate your time. And see you again next month for the meeting. Also, I'm sorry, almost forgot. There's a program that's coming up that we are collaborating with Tuskegee Airmen. And Mike, you can talk about that program really quickly.
Sure. So, again, in keeping the Tuskegee legacy alive, what we are doing is using something that the pilots use in their cockpit, which is called CRM, Crew Resource Management. And what that is when you're in your cockpit, you have your passengers, they become part of your crew. So you utilize the resources that you have. You know, you might be like, hey, can you look out for some traffic? You see anything? You see smoke? See anything? Let me know. So what we're doing is using these two powerful organizations, and we're putting together this program. We're collaborating, and the name of the program is called Helping Our Youth Take Flight. Tuskegee meets Black Pilots of America, the New York Metro chapter. And what our goal is to give the first flight to these kids. Well, we don't call them kids, we call them young aviators. And we're targeting the age group of 13 to 17, but that will probably change or grow as we go along and get off the ground. Again, what we're doing is hoping to take up some young aviators and hopefully get them to become aspiring pilots, become pilots, not only pilots, everything aviation. They can become air traffic control, probably part of the grounds crew, where they direct the aircraft and traffic on the airport. There's many different things that they can do in aviation, and we hope to take them up for their first flight just to expose them to aviation. And that's what the program is about. Our goal is to keep the legacy going, and we are getting this program funded so that the parents won't have to pay any money for their child taking this first flight. We do the flying, as Brian said, with Aviation for Us. We gather pilots with their planes. We, say, hey, Professor, can you come out? Hey, Donnell, you available? Your plane is good? And then we get these programs going, and we put smiles on the kids' faces, and that's our job. I love doing it. We love flying, and that's pretty much everything in a nutshell with these two organizations. Powerful, like I said. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
My pleasure.
One thing I'd like to say to piggyback off of what Mike said is not only to get these young aviators to produce them in the field of aviation. It's not only because of that. Just imagine a young 12, 13, 14-year-old kid or young aviator getting into an airplane, and now they're in control of that aircraft. They're able to fly that aircraft. Right? They're able to leave the ground and actually, be in control for that hour or however long it is. That right there in itself just opened up so many doors for this young aviator. It taught them a lot about life in general, right? So it's not only to get them into aviation, it's to get their minds and those wheels spinning and, get them engaged in life itself, right? When I started flying, the first time I went up, and I realized that I can fly an airplane, from there, I thought I could do anything in the world. There was nothing that was going to stop me from doing anything that I wanted to do. So it's not all about getting them in aviation. You know, maybe they want to be a doctor. Maybe they thought that being a doctor was not obtainable. But now if you was able to fly a plane, becoming a doctor should be easy now, right? So that's what we're here for. We're here to change lives, right? Change lives and open up doors for things that you would never have thought to do yourself. So one quote that I'd like to leave you with is, some people say that the sky is the limit. Some people say the sky is no limit. But us being pilots, the sky is our home. And that's truly our home. And I want to invite you all to come and see how it looks in the sky.
All right. I'm not certain if we did get any questions. Is there anyone that's in the chat that can let us know if there were any questions? On top of that, I would like to state that the information for this program that's coming up is going to be on both websites. That's the Claude B. Govan Tri-State Chapter, Tuskegee Airmen, Inc., and New York Metro Black Pilots of America website. We both have Facebook, the CBG Tuskegee Airmen, Inc., and New York Metro Black Pilots of America. We have Facebook as well. And Tuskegee has a YouTube channel, which will have all of this information about this program when we're off the ground, and you can stay tuned, and all the information will be on there.
All right, so with that said, this concludes our meeting. Again, thank you again for all you guys do.
Pleasure. Excuse me, were there any questions? I can't
On the chat, there are no questions. There's just a few comments. But to answer your question, Adrian, it is being recorded. So hopefully we can provide a copy, and if you would like to view it again, then it will be available to do so. But from the chat, I don't see any other questions, so we'll conclude the meeting from there. Just stay tuned for an email for our next meeting. I know the first weekend, I believe, is the 4th of July weekend, so we probably won't have a meeting for the 4th of July. But I plan to have some kind of airport event in July, and also we would like to start our meetings, like I said earlier, in person again. So again, thank you. This has been great, and see you guys next time.